The Coordination Committee report recommends the development be approved, subject to compliance with 19 conditions. These include a condition that the proposed office tower block be redesigned. It's suggested the new design would feature a tiering effect, similar to those demonstrated in these pictures from a book on American Art Deco office towers. However, Council says those illustrated are substantially taller than the one planned for Newcastle. It's thought the pictures may provide a guide to the effect tiering can achieve. The committee report says if the redesigned tiered style is adopted, there will be reduced floor space on the upper levels. It also recommends that Burwood Street be closed, with the street to be bought by the developer. It's also proposed the plaza area between the City Administration Building and the Tax Office be developed by the applicant and transferred to Council as open space. The report also calls for the provision of a public viewing facility near the top of the tower and the provision of off-street parking for a minimum of 1,126 vehicles in association with the proposed development and the Tax Office. At tonight's special meeting, Council should move a motion to either amend, adopt or reject the recommendation. Debate can then begin before a final decision is made.
Next year, it'll be ready to be leased.
50 people spilled out of the gallery in City Hall tonight to hear Council's decision on the Civic redevelopment. After more than 3 hours of debate, the final decision was reached. However, the motion wasn't carried before Council had been forced to adjourn for 5 minutes after a disruption in the gallery. An outcry erupted after Alderman Ron Robinson described those he said opposed the development. He claimed they included defeated candidates and publicly employed school teachers.
Will you please leave the room? Will you please leave the room? Will you please?
I'll sit here and take my position as a ratepayer in this town. I refuse to accept the insults of this country.
You escort that gentleman to the chamber.
The final recommendation to enable the project to go ahead features 20 conditions. Some were amended during the evening. What are your feelings about the final outcome of tonight's meeting?
Well, we feel the council's totally ignored for example, the 500 people turned up at the public meeting, the 150 people at the public access meeting, the 800 or 900 signatories on our petition, and we could have got thousands and thousands and thousands more. Pretty distressing to see them avoiding the issues and breaking their own height guidelines. Philip Cox recommended 103 stories apparently, and they'd shot it up 20 stories.
According to the Lands Department, a Crown Road runs from Catherine Hill Bay to Caves Beach, and there's been no application to close it. But members of the Swansea Caves Action Group are incensed by a fence recently constructed by Gordon Pacific, the company behind the Caves Beach tourist development. The Action Group says the fence blocks off the Crown Road and claims it's illegal.
Local residents such as myself who used to use the road all the time to come up here and get access to the coastline just past the fence here.
But I understand it's private land, is that right?
The land around it is, but the road itself is Crown land. It belongs to everyone, and they've closed it off here with this fence.
The Lands Department says under the Public Roads Act an application must be made to close a Crown Road. It must then be placed in the Government Gazette and a period must be allowed for objections to be heard. Only then can the road be closed and the rights of the users extinguished. At a recent public meeting to air views about the Caves Beach tourist development, the Mayor of Lake Macquarie, Ivan Welsh, told the gathering that there was no road. However, a report from the City Planner to Council says it is noted that an undeveloped Crown Road passes through and will need to be relinquished if the development is to proceed. Today, Ivan Welsh maintained his claim that there was no road. He said there was a Crown Road reserve and that was something entirely different. He did not see that there was anything wrong with fencing off the Crown Road reserve, and it happened all the time on farms.
In many areas in and around Newcastle, both students and teachers are feeling the effects of flu. At some schools, 1/3 of the student population has been affected. That's been the case at the Newcastle East Public School and the Charlestown South Public School, while the Bulahdelah Primary School today had 24 students away from a total school population of only 120. At Lambton High School, 60 of about 950 students were absent today, while the Waratah High School reported a 20% drop in attendances. The Royal Newcastle Hospital is also reporting an increased incidence of illness amongst staff, but says the problem hasn't reached a crucial stage and patients are unaffected. In other parts of the workforce in Newcastle, some are experiencing 4.8% absenteeism. The average figure is below 2%. Meanwhile, in the Mater Hospital's paediatric unit, 50 more children have been admitted with medical problems during May this year compared with May 1987. Belinda Borissow for NBN News.
Police say the man in his mid-30s was working at the bottom of a filler pump shaft when he was knocked unconscious by falling machinery. Members of the Central Coast Volunteer Rescue Association and police moved a Caterpillar crane over the shaft and lowered a bosun's chair to the conscious but still groggy victim.
He was in fairly good spirits. He was cold. The water was fairly cold down there. I didn't actually go down. We controlled the operation from the top. There wasn't much to do down there, and there's not a great deal of room down there anyway.
The man was treated at Wyong Hospital for mild hypothermia and head injuries. His condition is described as satisfactory. The shaft was part of a sewerage system being built under contract for the Department of Public Works. Work on the site was immediately called off, pending an inspection by the Department of Labour and Industry.
The Rankin Park Private Hospital will be established on the campus of the huge public teaching complex, which is well on the way towards completion. In outlining the new healthcare projects today, Health Minister Collins said the government will change legislation soon to broaden the scope of health services
to this region, and I believe that they will simply add another layer of bureaucracy. They will
in construction costs alone, all to be met by the private sector at no cost to the taxpayer. As well as the Rankin Park and Maitland developments, 24 new private hospital developments were announced on the Central Coast at North Gosford, Woy Woy, Erina and Berkeley Vale. Mr Collins said private hospitals are little more than a cottage industry, but will now develop to perform major medical procedures. The Minister said this will enable the reduction of the number of people on waiting lists for treatment at the state's public hospitals.
Reasonably well on that occasion.
While it's the business
Ball
end of
across
the
to Michael
season,
Johnson.
as far as the competition is
Plenty of space there to make that.
concerned,
Puts the two down. And Sean Dennis, nice little intercept.
Although there's a heavy
Takes the shot into Wayne McDaniel. Can't put it away.
It's expected
That's where he just takes the drive.
majority of this year's team.
And here we'll see it done.
Certainly to stay is the Falcons' only homegrown player, Peter Hill. The 19-year-old has spent just 2 years away from Newcastle when he attended the Institute of Sport. Last year he was a member of the Australian under-20 team and played in the World Youth Championship. This year, after 2 years in Canberra, he returned home for his first season in the NBL competition.
I think he's had a tremendous first year because he's really our first substitution off the bench. in a team that's right in there to make the finals. So he would be, in my opinion, in the top 2 or 3 rookies in the league this year.
Decides to take the drive.
It's been a big season for the young man.
That's 2 seconds remaining.
One shot in the game against
And we go to three-quarter time. When the crowd has erupted here. Sensational play here at the Sports and Entertainment Centre.
Wayne threw me the ball and I thought, oh, well, there's only 1 second left, so I'll usually throw it at the basket and just happened to go in.
Did it surprise you when it went in?
Oh, well, when I let it go, I thought, oh, well, that's going to be close. And it just went straight through the net, so that was it.
Hello, I'm Tom Hilston. The bulldozers have moved into Hams Beach today for the start of Lake Macquarie Council's $1 million bicentennial project. The beach reclamation project hasn't met the approval of everyone, however. Surfers still hold fears for the future of their beach.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6 on NBN.
Good afternoon, I'm Peter Ryan. Tonight on the news, the Minister for Transport, Bruce Baird, has called for tenders on a new tollway to be built north of Bulahdelah. Some locals are angry as the government has made plans for the new road, but has neglected to inform them.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6 on NBN.
The bulldozer will spend 2 weeks ripping out exotic bitu bush which infest the dunes and levelling the sand knolls around the clumps. Eventually, the entire higher coastline will be one even sweep, resown with Australian native grasses. But local surfers fear changes to the dunes will affect wave quality off the beaches. Plans for the $1 million project have been on display for several weeks, and council officers say they've had 3 public meetings to modify the plan to suit beachgoers. Surfers were involved in those talks, but they remain sceptical.
I think we've just been ripped off. You can't stop big business, you can't stop money. They call it progress, not in my eyes.
Newcastle District Soil Conservation Officer Jeff Hunt says there was no alternative.
If nothing's done, the degradation will continue and get worse. The sand will encroach onto roads and even more into private property. And the beach as a whole, including its surfing quality, will deteriorate further.
Surfers were told they would continue to be consulted. Project officials say the smaller frontal dunes will not be interfered with, especially since native grasses are already re-establishing there. The impromptu planning debate ended on a conciliatory note, but surfers say they will continue to watch the work closely.
Maybe we can come to some agreement here. We're just not too sure. Depends on how much they give and take.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
Despite protest from local residents, Lake Macquarie City Council has decided its proposed Marine Study Centre will be built at the Council's preferred site at Salts Bay, Swansea. Only one alderman voted against the motion, which was moved at last night's council meeting.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The Dairy Farmers Co-op is worth an estimated $60 million, with an annual turnover of $260 million. Its factories service milk producers from Lismore to Albury. However, the co-op is now embroiled in a major civil war. Fearing that cooperatives will fall into the hands of outside interests, the previous state government introduced legislation forcing non-producing members to forfeit their shares. That ruling was implemented by the Dairy Farmers Co-op at a meeting in Newcastle several months ago. In dairy co-op language, a producing member is called a wet shareholder, while a non-producer is a dry. Under the government guidelines, only producers can vote at the meeting. they passed a resolution defining wets as those who supplied at least 200 litres of milk to the co-op in a 7-day period. The meeting also agreed to include dries, who supplied at least $500,000 worth of goods used by the co-op each year. The co-op is only obliged to purchase the shares back at $2 each, a fact which has angered many dries who claim their shares are worth closer to $12 and who have been offered $5 by giant food companies Bulahdelah and Bega. Bulahdelah has received options on more than 2 million shares and has been criticised for trying to take control of the co-op, a suggestion dismissed by the company's general manager, Jeff Giuradini.
Well, it's patently nonsense. We can go to 20%, but even with 20%, which is about 600,000 shares, we still only have one vote. So it's impossible to control the co-op.
Bulahdelah are taking the board of dairy farmers to court for refusing to register their shares, and now the smaller holders are also fighting back. Last Friday, almost 100 attended the meeting at East Maitland and voted to send a delegation to the Minister for Consumer Affairs, Jerry Peacock, to apply for 6 months to fight the ruling. The dry shares were due to be forfeited last Sunday, but following a similar meeting in Mossvale 2 weeks ago, they were granted 3 weeks' grace. Meeting organiser Jim Tuddenham says the dries have no wish to control the co-op.
We've never doubted that at any time, and there's always been that clause in there that the wet shareholder, his vote is 3-1 of the dry shareholders, so that's no problem at all. I mean, and we can always put another safety clause in to make sure that the dairy farmer still has control of his cooperative.
Mr Tuddenham was also critical of the inclusion in the co-op of large material suppliers, an action he sees as hypocritical.
The thing that disgusts me in this whole exercise as far as Dairy Farmers Company is concerned, they voted to go and allow the multinational companies like ICI, Tetra Pak and other companies, I just don't have the names of them out here with me now, but Kraft Foods and all them, they allowed them to come in and take shares in Dairy Farmers Company and throw us ex-dairy farmers out.
Were found at 10 o'clock last night in heavily timbered country inaccessible to four-wheel drive and trail bikes. A helicopter dropped a survival pack for the night, then winched the youngsters out at first light. 16-year-old Tim Moore and 15-year-old Nicholas Watkins were the first to touch down, followed shortly by another 15-year-old Alan Westbury. The scouts were none the worse for the ordeal, but thankful to be safe and warm after a rainy night and extremely low temperatures. Over cups of hot soup, they told how they had strayed on a hike that should have taken 4 hours.
We looked at our map and tried to get to one of the roads that was marked on it, but we couldn't find it, so we camped for the night on Saturday night and thought we might be able to find our way on during the day on Sunday, but no, we couldn't. We tried to get to another road, but just got lost even more.
Police and SES searchers say the youngsters couldn't have wound up in worse terrain. The hike was planned as a training exercise for another bushwalk in Ku-ring-gai National Park next week. The boys say they still plan to go ahead with that walk despite the weekend drama. The boys were spotted at 10 o'clock last night in heavily timbered country inaccessible to four-wheel drives or trail bikes. The Westpac rescue helicopter dropped a survival pack for the night before winching them to safety at first light. The rescue ended an extensive search which started yesterday morning when the youngsters failed to return from a 4-hour hike on Saturday afternoon. 16-year-old Tim Moore of Rankin Park and 15-year-old Nicholas Watkins of New Lambton were the first to touch down, followed shortly by 16-year-old Alan Westbury, also from New Lambton. Thankful to be safe and warm after 2 rainy nights in extremely cold conditions, the boys told how they strayed off course.
We looked at our map and tried to get to one of the roads that was marked on it, but we couldn't find it, so we camped for the night on Saturday night and thought we might be able to find our way on during the day on Sunday, but no, we couldn't. We tried to get to another road, but just got lost even more.
The boys are all members of the first New Lambton Venturers and planned the hikers training for another walk in Ku-ring-gai National Park. Despite the weekend drama, they say they'll go ahead with that bushwalk.
In recent years, it's become increasingly unpopular for doctors to stay in the hospital system after completing their internships, unless they are doing a specialty, and the state's hospitals have been the first to feel the pinch. But now there's an even greater threat to the pool of interns and residents. Both Sydney University and the University of New South Wales have announced that they intend to extend their medical courses from 5 years to 6. This means that in 1991 and 1993, there'll be a critical shortage of interns and a shortage of resident medical officers and registrars in subsequent years. Newcastle will by no means escape from the shortage, as interns are allocated to the whole of the state. According to Newcastle Hospital's clinical superintendent, Dr Brian Masters, Newcastle will be unable to second staff to hospitals such as Belmont and the Mater if there is not a radical change to the secondment system.
We simply wouldn't have available numbers of junior medical staff to second to satisfy the staffing requirements of these outlying hospitals.
So basically, if nothing was done, the outlying hospitals would just have to go without?
I'm afraid that's the picture that people will have to get used to as it is in a number of instances.
A recent report on the subject canvasses a number of options for coping with the problem, all depend on a major revision of the allocation and secondment system.
Well, the broad thrust of this report is to make working conditions and learning conditions, facilities for teaching, much better than the current situation.
It's thought the man in his early 60s suffered a heart attack while driving south along the Pacific Highway. Emergency service personnel say the man's Toyota Corolla van crossed the median strip and the 3 northbound lanes of the highway, mounted the gutter and careered through a wire mesh fence, finally hitting a tree in the grounds of the Gateshead High School. The car just missed a boy riding a bike, however no one else was involved in the accident. Despite valiant attempts by ambulance paramedics, the man could not be revived. His name has not yet been released, however it's believed the man was from Sydney.
Tonight we'll bring you a story on local tennis sensation Rachel McQuillan's return to Newcastle. Rachel has just returned from an exceptionally fruitful European tennis trip where she and partner Joanne Fall managed to clinch the Wimbledon junior girls doubles.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Providing the most comprehensive, up-to-date and reliable coverage available. So join the NBN News team every night at 6. Don't do it.